My advice is to, as King says here, simply have fun. Hello and welcome. My name is Tom Levine, and I'm an award-winning author of 9 novels traditionally published originally with imprints of Random House, Simon & Schuster, and other New York publishers. Also written for the comic book series Spawn over at Image Comics. I currently write fiction for the BattleTech line of tabletop role-playing games, and I am a Bram Stoker Award finalist. And this is Stephen King's Danse Macabre. I'm going to jump right in where we left off last time. We made it to page 19. I paused in my last broadcast to watch Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and now I have seen it. There are 2 different versions, primarily, that I'm aware of. The Siegel version and the, not Finney, but what's the other version? Kaufman. The Kaufman remake with Donald Sutherland, which I haven't seen yet, but I want to because I know that's a classic as well. So we're going to jump in and see what Stephen King has to say about Invasion of the Body Snatchers. There is nothing really physically horrible at the Siegel version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. No gnarled and evil star travelers here, no twisted, mutated shape under the facade of normality. I'm just going to stop there because, I hadn't seen the movie before. Wasn't sure what to expect. It's a black and white film from, I want to say 56 or so, 56, 59, something like that. And a lot of my understanding and knowledge of movies from that era comes, frankly, as it does to probably a lot of Gen Xers, from Mystery Science Theater 3000. And those movies are terrible. These are the Burt I. Gordon, Gordon Corman, not Gordon Corman, I'm sorry. Not Gordon Corman's an author. Excuse me. No, Burt I. Gordon is... Then who's Corman? Roger Corman. Jesus. It's early. Roger Corman, Burt I. Gordon, these were really fast, really cheap, and they just pumped these things out by the handful, and which is a really funny sentence to say. I should probably rephrase that. I was expecting the same out of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and I was delightfully surprised to discover that Invasion of the Body Snatchers was actually quite a good movie. It's held up really well. It was creepy, which King is going to talk about here in just a moment. And the special effects were good. There weren't a lot of special effects, but the ones that they had were really pretty effective, I thought. By the way, little sidebar PSA here. Are you guys still not aware of your library? You have got to go to your local library. Just put in your city name and then library, and I promise you a link will pop up. You've got to see what they've got. They have got ebooks, they've got regular books, obviously, fiction, nonfiction, newspapers, magazines, CDs, yes, CDs. They've got free music. A lot of them are on this program called Freegal, or Freegal, I think it's Freegal, which you can actually get free downloads every week that you get to keep forever. You're not just borrowing them, you're keeping them. Like, your library is such a wonderful source of not only information, but entertainment, and it's just there for free. And if you can't make it today, cool, go on the website and you can reserve it and they'll pull it for you, and then you've got all week or 2 weeks or however long they hold them to go pick up the item. It's a great system, and you've already paid for it. If you pay taxes, you've already paid for it. So please go visit your local library. Librarians want you there. I worked there for 12 years. We want you there. Anyway, end of PSA. Back to the book. The pot people are just a little different, that's all. A little vague, a little messy. Although Finney never puts this fine a point on it in his book, he certainly suggests that the most horrible thing about them is that they lack even the most common and easily attainable sense of aesthetics. Never mind, Finney suggests, that these usurping aliens from outer space can't appreciate La Traviata or Moby Dick or even a good Norman Rockwell cover on the Saturday Evening Post. That's bad enough, but, my God, they don't mow their lawns or replace the pane of garage glass that got broken when the kid down the street batted a baseball through it. They don't repaint their houses when they get flaky. The roads leading into Santa Mira, we're told, are so full of potholes and washouts that pretty soon the salesmen who service the town, who aerate its municipal lungs with the life-giving atmosphere of capitalism, you might say, will soon no longer bother to come. Wow. Stephen sometimes writes a mouthful, and I can see where I get it from now. The thing I want to point to, though, in this particular paragraph, that was just one paragraph, by the way. The thing I want to point to in this paragraph is the specificity. And if you've listened to me or read me at all, you know this is the point that I come back to a lot. This line, Finney suggests that the usurping aliens can't appreciate Moby Dick or even a good Norman Rockwell cover on the Saturday Evening Post. That's a lot of words. He could have said, Finney suggests that these usurping aliens can't appreciate good literature, period. That's bad enough. He could have just said that. Instead, he goes on this long, drawn-out La Traviata or Moby Dick or even a good Norman Rockwell cover on the Saturday Evening Post. That is detail, that is specificity, and specificity is the number one thing I think I try to get out of my writing students, because it really, it just brings the text to life. Something to think about, you know. And this is my usual fallback example. Should you say red or should you say crimson? Those are not exactly the same thing. It depends on the point of view that you're writing from, but there's a difference between saying red and saying crimson. There's a difference between saying a good book and specifying Moby Dick or specifying Norman Rockwell cover on the Saturday Evening Post. Like, it's a lot of words, but it builds a much deeper image. Now, when he goes on to talk about aerate its municipal lungs to the life-giving atmosphere of capitalism, you might say, like, that's probably too much, but it's still a fun sentence to read, I think. So, something to think about. Back to the book. The gross-out level is one thing, but it is on that second level of horror that we often experience that low sense of anxiety, which we call the creeps. Over the years, Invasion of the Body Snatchers has given a lot of people the creeps, and all sorts of high-flown ideas have been imputed to Siegel's film version. It was seen as an anti-McCarthy film until someone pointed out the fact that Don Siegel's political views could hardly be called leftish. Then people began seeing it as a better dead than red picture. Of the two sides, I think that second one better fits the film Siegel made, the picture that ends with Kevin McCarthy in the middle of a freeway screaming, "They're coming! They're coming!" to cars which rush heedlessly by him. But in my heart, I don't really believe that Siegel was wearing a political hat at all when he made the movie, and you will see later that Jack Finney has never believed it either. I believe he was simply having fun, and that the undertones just happened. What an important line for us writers. I believe he was simply having fun. Folks, if there's one thing I've learned in this business that I've been in since the early 2000s, you have to have fun. If you come at your fiction with a statement to make, there's a good chance your fiction will falter. There's a good chance you're going to come off as, wait for it, didactic. Something I've been accused of in the past by professional reviewers when it comes to some of my YA. Okay, cool. I accept that. It certainly wasn't something I set out to do, though. Generally speaking, I don't start a book with the idea of, haha, I'm going to teach you something now. I think most of us, certainly myself, I'm much more interested in the exploration of what happens. What happens, because I also write from character first. My buddy Joe writes from plot first. He needs a plot, he needs an outline, he will coat his dining room table in note cards and arrange them until they're just right. Then he will start his book. I am more of a pantser in that sense, where I'll get an idea for a character or a couple lines of dialogue, I'll write them down, I'll kind of play with them, and then later on, if it looks like I've got a story, then I will start worrying about the structure. But you have to have fun. Regardless of what your default setting is when it comes to writing, you have to have fun and not be out necessarily to make a point. Do people do it? Yes. Are there authors who set out to make a point with fiction? Of course there are. Good for them. I think it's hard to do. I think it's hard to do well. My advice is to, as King says here, simply have fun. Back to the book. This doesn't invalidate the idea that there is an allegorical element in Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It is simply to suggest that sometimes these pressure points, these terminals of fear, are so deeply buried and yet so vital that we may tap them like artesian wells, saying one thing out loud while we express something else in a whisper. I like that. The Philip Kaufman version of Finney's novel is fun, although, to be fair, not quite as much fun as Siegel's. But that whisper has changed into something entirely different. The subtext of Kaufman's picture seems to satirize the whole "I'm okay, you're okay, so let's get in the hot tub and massage out precious consciousness movement." Jesus, of the Egocentric 70s. Again, let's stop there. Dude, Steven, that's a lot. That is just, it's fun. It's more fun to read than it is to speak out loud. But yeah, that was just a mouthful. Back to the book, which is to suggest that although the uneasy dreams of the mass subconscious may change from decade to decade, the pipeline into that well of dreams remains constant and vital. The pipeline into that well of dreams remains constant and vital. I might have to come back to that another time because that makes me think of many, many things that are happening in the world today. So I'm going to set that aside and keep reading. This is the real Danse Macabre, I suspect. Those remarkable moments when the creator of a horror story is able to unite the conscious and the subconscious mind with one potent idea. I believe it happened to a greater degree with the Siegel version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but of course both Siegel and Kaufman were able to proceed courtesy of Jack Finney, who sank the original well. All of which brings us back, I think, to the Stratford Theatre on a warm fall afternoon in 1957. I'm going to stop there. That takes us to page 21 and section 3 of An Invitation to Dance. So we're getting there. We still got, several hundred pages to get through, but what the fuck. This is the real Danse Macabre, those remarkable moments when the creator of a horror story is able to unite the conscious and subconscious mind with one potent idea. I would argue, and I would be curious if he wants to give me a call, I would be curious if King himself would argue this point or not. I think that's going to be true of all genres. Obviously, we're reading a book written by a horror author that is about horror, so of course we're going to focus on horror as a genre or as a category, but this idea of uniting the conscious and the subconscious into one idea, I think that applies, just off the top of my head, to basically any genre, whether that is romance or fantasy or horror or what have you. Uniting the subconscious and the conscious toward or for one idea. I think that's powerful. I think there's a lot to explore there that I am far too sleepy to get into at the moment. But I think it bears considering. It's the kind of thing that I think some of us stumble into. Speaking for myself, I think I've run into it on accident. When I think of things like that, I think of my novel Zero. Not a horror novel at all. More of a coming of age, certainly not a romance. But there was something about that book, and I worked on that book for many, many, many years and rewrote that book many, many, many times. But that by the time I got to the end of it, and by the time it got to the publisher and out to the bookshelves at your local bookstore, I think there was something unifying about it. I think there was something organic and authentic to that book. Not to say that my other books aren't authentic or aren't organic. They are. I'm pretty confident when I say that. There might be a couple of exceptions if I stopped and thought about it. But there is something so deeply resonant about Zero. And I think this line sort of unite the conscious and subconscious mind with one potent idea. I will leave you with that. What is the one potent idea in your story? It's an interesting thought. It's one of those things that I would love to do on purpose. I know authors, I think, who can do it on purpose. I generally don't because, again, going back to the previous point, if I try to come at fiction in particular with a potent idea that I am trying to convince you of or teach you about or bring you in on, then I think it does get didactic. I think you're going to see through my fiction and say, Tom, you're beating me over the head with this potent idea. Versus if I'm having fun, which I did with Zero, which I did and do with most of my writing, by and large, is just fun, then I think the potent idea can then be discovered and then sort of rooted out like a gem, like a diamond, like a, pick your metaphor, and polished and shaped into something that serves the whole of the story and of the novel, and then in turn serves the reader. That's really deep for, 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning, but I think it bears consideration as a storyteller, no matter what format you work in. What is that core idea? What is that deep thing? What is the potent idea that will unite the conscious and subconscious mind for your reader? That's heavy stuff. It's heavy stuff, but it's cool stuff, and your readers, your viewers, will appreciate it. I would just caution you to maybe not worry about that first. Always worry about fun first, and then come back to the work and discover what that cool idea is, what that big idea is, the potent idea that you can bring out and polish and shine for us. That's all for today. I hope that was helpful. Hopefully we'll see you again next week, and check out any links that I've left below, okay? Take care and keep writing.